Hi, everyone. Welcome to a brand new App Figures chat. We're a few minutes behind, which hasn't happened, I think, ever. But I have a super awesome guest here that I've been dying to have on the show for a long time, and I haven't been live streaming in a long time. I took a quick break for the summer. I have a whole new studio behind me, as you can see. And this one is permanent. This one is not going away. I'm not changing it anytime soon. So let's get started. Today's talk is all about Apple search ads. Many of you know that I love Apple search ads. I love talking about Apple search ads. I think it's a great platform. It's a great way to get discovery, but it comes with a bunch of nuances. The one thing that is really great about Apple search ads is somehow Apple managed to get everyone to spend their money on it. And we're not talking small campaigns, we're talking thousands and thousands. So I've invited Thomas today, who's been doing Apple search ads and many other paid ad platforms for a long time, super vocal on Twitter. Everything you say, Thomas, makes sense to me. And I know that's kind of weird to say about people on the internet, but I really wanted to have you on the show. So thank you for joining me. And the goal of today is to talk about if you're already running campaigns, the bigger campaigns, the more you have to optimize. How do you get more downloads out of them? How do you squeeze more out of your hard earned cash going to Apple? And Thomas has a whole bunch of ideas and opinions. So thank you for joining me, Thomas. Please tell the audience a little bit more about yourself, do a real intro, and then we'll start talking about Apple search ads.
As well. I've been following a lot of episodes, so it's nice and fun to be the other side of the camera today. Hopefully bringing some value to people who join now and those who listen late. So Thomas, you might see me online as Thomas BCN, French, like you can probably hear. I live across Spain and Portugal, and I work in app marketing for almost 10 years. I started, the background is pretty much in paid acquisition. So I dabbled on another platform, Facebook, Google, Apple didn't exist at the time, or TikTok. But then when they show up, Snap, Apple, TikTok, Pinterest, when they had it, and a bunch of others. And then I kind of, I specialize in subscription apps mostly. So I'm a bit less knowledgeable on some other verticals like e-coms or fintechs or gaming, although I do follow what they do to like copy the good ideas and good practice. So very much oriented on subscription apps. And I, over the last maybe 5 years, I tend to like broaden a little bit my scope beyond paid. I enjoy a lot working on onboarding and monetization. And I started basically because it was moving the needle of acquisition more than whatever I could do in the campaigns. And lately a bit more on data topics and overall strategy. But I keep my first love on UA and stay the hands in the motor, like I say it. And Apple Search has a bit of a particular one to me. I kind of not kind of like it more than the others. Somehow have a process around it. So I always follow like what's new, love exchanging with other people, or what their techniques. I love disagreeing with people also, so, because we do it differently. And hopefully we can package some of this into learnings for people today.
That's the goal.
Yeah.
I think Apple Search has just because of what Apple did, because of their ability to take a platform that was so closed off and open it up very minimally. There are so many limitations, which we'll talk about in a little bit. So many limitations that, in my opinion, are just frustrating and infuriating if you're trying to spend your money on getting more users. But they did it in a way that made everyone comfortable giving them money. So now you have developers who wouldn't spend $100 on a Google campaign or a Facebook campaign, spending thousands and thousands of dollars and not always getting the returns they're looking for. So when we initially talked, he said that when you look at a campaign, when you start working with a new company or with a new app, there's usually a lot that you can do to save the money almost instantly. And that's what got me excited because when I talk to developers, it's almost the same thing. They're usually spending on the wrong keywords. They're usually spending on the wrong strategy. They're not targeting. So all these things that are really basic. So that we're going to talk about for sure. But then what I would like to do is also get a little bit more in depth and talk about the other types of campaigns that Apple has, which seem amazing, but I think are terrible. And also the difference between basic and advanced. And basic is bad. Basic is just bad. I think we both agree on this, right?
Yeah, totally. Like, don't do basic no matter what.
Yeah. It's not worth it. It's just not worth it. But I think this can really lead us into starting the conversation about Apple search ads. So at the core of Apple search ads is all the smart matching and the broad matching, and Apple saying, "Give us one little thing, and we'll turn it into a whole campaign." How do you normally deal with that? Do you immediately turn it off? Do you go and turn all the broad matches into stand? What do you do when it comes to that initially for a keyword campaign?
I usually have like this campaign that I call discovery, whether it's on broad match or search match, on all the kind of accounts, like whether they're just starting or even when they're big, just by exploration. And I think it's I was reading somebody say, oh, don't do search match if you have very small budgets. It's true that you're not going to see all the search term. I would argue the opposite. Actually, if you're
Really?
starting,
Okay.
I do like to do the search match because I want to see where, probably not spending a huge amount of time and money, because I'm going to concentrate on the exact keywords that are actually yielding more, but always have one on the side. And I say especially at the beginning because I want to see what Apple is interpreting as being my app and how it's relevant and how it matched me with things. I'll give you an example of, I'm working with a kids app that's called Lingo Kids, and is basically aiming at all kind of soft skills for younger children, like for 2 to 8. And because there is lingo in the name of the brand, we can see that the algorithm is assimilating us with all the language learning apps. But we're
Makes
not
sense.
teaching English or any other particular language. It's just like there are many games for kids. They are there for development. They're educational games. They're not like they're not in the gaming category, and it's supported by like teachers and educators and psychologists and so on. But the point is, they're always associated with like language learning, and we see that actually the conversion rates are terrible on those, like because it's not what people are searching, you know. But it's interesting to see how the platform interprets how we are, because in this case it's kind of bad, but in some cases we actually discovered stuff that was pretty brilliant. I'll give you an example, and it was many years ago. I was working for a fitness app. I had this discovery campaign going on, and Apple started showing us for junk food stuff like Domino Pizza and McDonald's and stuff. And I'd never thought about it myself. Like, I was like, and I started appearing on that. I was like, oh no, this is super irrelevant. I shouldn't be on that. And I was about to put them in negative when suddenly I say, no, this is brilliant. Like somebody who's looking to order pizza, I'm going to show them that they could get healthy. And obviously my click-through rate is not going to be very high, but I love this idea. It's very provocative. Had a bit of a, not super viral, but like a bunch of people would take it on a bunch of users like looking for McDonald's and seeing the A tweet ads say, oh, this is an amazing ID, blah, blah, blah. And the truth is I made the ID my own and I publicized it as my own, but the truth is I didn't have it. It's the discovery campaign who put me there. And then I obviously, so the thing about the discovery campaign is I never wanted to stay in discovery, basically because you're not getting post-install data on those search terms, on what you're searched for. So as soon as I identify terms, I want to move them elsewhere. Can do it in a couple different ways, but basically I want my discovery campaign to stay relatively small at all time. There's another reason I do it on very large account. There's one particular account I've been managing for over 5 years, and that had discovery campaign the whole time. So you can think after a while, there's no more terms to discover. And it's true that it's shrinking a little bit. It's not a huge part because we've got so many negative keywords in there. Everything is in exact elsewhere. But you always discover new trends there. We always have a spike. Many of them, they're irrelevant. So that particular app is in the entertainment space. And well, entertainment, let's say music and video. And we started getting a ton of delivery for Madden, the NFL game from FIFA at some point. So super relevant. I don't know what they match there. But sometimes we would see new competitors that we haven't identified that are popping very fast. And for me, it's a bit of a detection system of what's trending. And then I'm going to try it. And obviously, a lot of things that appear there, they're never going to work. But I'm happy I tried them. And I'm happy it's kind of, it acts that I don't need to be on top of things all the time. They just appear regularly in there.
Yeah, that kind of makes sense. It's interesting because when I think about a discovery campaign, I always think about just some money being burned. And the only reason I say that is because all those things that you said make a ton of sense to me, but you can have tools to do that. That's what we're building. So we're building a suite of tools to find those keywords, to identify new competitors. We have tools to identify new competitors. And the discovery campaign, which is what Apple also recommends, always felt like how you burn money. But it does make sense that you want this sort of visibility in Apple's own way. if when it comes to budgeting, how do you budget for a discovery campaign versus actually getting results? Because discovery is likely not getting you very much bang for your buck.
No, it's true. I mean, in the early phase, it's kind of I really cap it on an amount. I don't want to spend more than this, and they're a small part of the account. I don't know, maybe 10-20% at the beginning or something, like, because
So
I
very
prefer to keep the
minimal.
control on the rest.
Yeah.
So it's kind of how I do it. I cap it like this at the beginning. When time has gone, very often what happens, and this is a bit of a personal I mean tactic. I'm not saying it's the most efficient or whatnot, but it's very often how I have it, is that I've got very tight bid on that one. And when
Makes
you look
sense.
at, I'm going to make a parallel with like other types of platforms where it's more behavioral targeting and so on, not so much contextual. And typically you'd have places where you've got like cheap CPIs, but maybe people convert less, and other places where it's really your core audience, everybody's battling for them, very high CPIs, but very high conversion.
Yeah.
And the truth is, as a marketer, I want both things. I want to tap into all kind of audience, but at the right price.
Yeah.
And I kind of bring that. So let's say on network X and Y, I would have like a cheap CPI campaign, and I know they don't convert much, but the ratio is actually the same of where I pay 10x more for the install and they convert a lot. And within search ads, I tend to bring the same kind of approach, in the sense that after a while, at the beginning, my discovery, they really to understand what's going on with the keywords, the algorithm, as a complement, because I obviously use other methods, my own research and tooling and stuff, but they're a complement. Yeah. And after a while, they become kind of these cheap CPI campaigns. I actually have one like running, I mean, it's not massive, but I think spending $500 a day or something. So for some people, it's actually not nothing. And it's actually quite profitable. It's one of the best campaigns in the account. It's just, I know as soon as I'm going to lift up the bid, it's going to spend more and it's not going to be profitable.
Yeah.
So, but to give you a rough idea, in this account, this campaign, the low bid campaign, I think I'm paying the install about 4 or 5x less. I've got a bunch of completely irrelevant terms in there. But if I'm going to pay 20 cents for an install and I'm making 50 cents out of them, the client is happy. They tell me they want a 2x return is good for them. I'll take them. It's just, I know as soon as I'm going to increase the bids, like this thing is going to go sideways. And obviously, because I keep the bid very low, you can imagine that the scale is not super big. But I think it's a side thing, like on where like the main goal today is to talk about scaling. And I think you have to approach every single possibility of scaling it very, very differently. Your brand campaign, generic competitors, the discovery campaign, and the new placement. I think they each require a completely different approach. But in the grand scheme of things, if the goal is to scale, I want to be trying them all. Like they're probably not going to scale all to the same extent, and there's going to be a complete unbalance. It's never going to be 20% on each. But if it can help push another 5% because I'm doing it this way, and it's a completely different inventory from what I'm doing from my normal keywords, I'll take it. It's still a plus 5%, you know?
It's very interesting because it means that when you think about scaling, you usually think about throwing more money on a thing that works, but it's also, you can build more things and then you will have more things that work. So it's kind of a win-win the way I see it. You see, that's why I like having you on the show. It's these sort of little nuggets that I don't normally see people talking about. Don't scale by just growing one thing, scale by growing more things. It's interesting.
Yeah, I mean, you can go in depth and in breadth, and at the end of the day, I want to try a bit of both, like not be limiting. It's true that the App Store is relatively short tail. So the big volume, where the money is really spent, where the installs are going to come, it's most likely that in your account, there's going to be somewhere between 5 and 25 keywords that are spending 80% of the money. That's just classic. Like in some accounts a bit less skewed, in some other account a bit more. It doesn't really matter. I have an account that 3 keywords are, I even know somebody who spent 100K a month on one keyword, and they only have one keyword. Like they tried a whole lot of things, doesn't work. It's a very, very particular case. I'm not going to say what keyword that is, but it's a very funny case.
Now I'm curious.
They only bid on one keyword. And now what I mean is that it's true that it's concentrated, but I want to try the other approach, because at the end, this very short tail keyword that bring 80% of the volume, it's also where all the competition is going to be. And it's most likely that it's going to be fierce in there in terms of bidding and who's, like, it's a bidding war basically. So I focus on the bidding war because it's where 80% of the money is spent. But I have I have a French name for it. I don't know how you would say in English, like kind of going at the end of the drawer to look for the small bits, you know, and
Yeah.
they still add up. Like, so I try to like grind a little bit here and there. It comes on top. I know it's never going to be at the 80%. It
Yeah.
doesn't matter. I'll take it as well. Like, I
That,
want it all, basically. Not
yeah.
all of it is going to succeed, but at least I'm going to try it all.
I think that's a great approach. The more you do, the more you scale at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And there's a saying, do things that don't scale in the entrepreneur world. And I think if you do them enough times, especially in something like an ad campaign or a user acquisition campaign, those just add up. And that makes a ton of sense.
Yeah, you know, it makes me think like on this discovery campaign on this account that I have them running for a very long time. I discovered terms that I didn't think on my own because they're not natural to what the app is doing, but they're
Okay.
adjacent. They're kind of not directly related, but indirectly related. And some of them, I discarded them from my keyword research. Like, no, this is not relevant enough. They kind
I
of
see.
appeared here. So I say, I'm still going to go. And I end up having like this kind of a lot of small ad groups. But if you take them in combination, they're not so small. It's like, okay, every single one of them is spending $10 a day or something. But if I have 10 or 20 of them, I still add up at the end of the day. They're very often keywords have less volume, but they also have a lot less competition, and I kind of own them.
Yeah.
So I can think of a few, like kind of, I don't know, there's one, I can't remember the exact number, but there's like 100 search a day or something.
Okay.
But I completely own those terms. Like I have 90% share.
So you're getting
because
all
nobody's
100
going on.
searches.
Sorry?
You're getting all 100 searches, basically.
Yeah, but I'm doing this 20 times or 50 times.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
It amounts to, it's just, it piles up. And I would imagine also that like people who don't go in as much depth or don't have as much time or automate differently or whatnot, they might miss out on some of those. And very often those, they're not really big, but I managed to have them very, let's say, very profitable compared to the average.
Yeah.
Which actually gives me a bit of margin to be more aggressive on where the battle is really fierce, because the client is going to look at the return of the whole account or whatnot. And I'm like, okay, so the target is 2. I'm going to take, I have the same tactic on other channels, for example, in bidding in countries where nobody's bidding. So one of my, you don't have them in Apple Search Chat, so you can't do that. But one of my tricks are the Caribbean and Polynesian country. They're very small, but they still add up, and nobody's advertising there. So it's super cheap. I'm getting 10x return there. And maybe it's nothing, it's not a huge scale, but let's say if I manage to get 10 or 20K a month of pure margin from this country, that's 10 or 20K a month I can invest in trying to battle on what is the real battle, on these short tail keywords in the US, but there's a moment, there's no magic on this high volume keyword in the US. The other people are going to be very focused there. They're going to be trying CPPs. They're going to be trying different bidding strategies, different targeting, and I'm going to be doing the same. So it's kind of, I know at some point it's going to be tight on returns. If I can make a bit of margin from elsewhere, I can balance it out with that one. So it kind of gives me a bit of liberty of movement to do this on the side. I also do it for the fun, to be honest. Otherwise, I have like these 5 keywords I'm always on. And I'm like, this is really interesting to go in depth, but and sometimes you just have to drop the ball. I mean, I have a couple of examples where there's a bunch of keywords. There's no matter what I do, there's no way we're gonna get there. Like I don't know. To give one example, I worked with a meditation app a few months ago, and they're not one of the very big ones, let's say. They're more of a startup one. And they're like, yeah, go try and bid on meditation in the US. And there's no way you're going to get there.
Super tough.
You don't have the kind of budget. You don't have kind of the brand awareness around it that would justify that you can do it. And so I say, okay, we're gonna look much broader than that. So the tactic also depends a lot who you are, at what scale you are. And obviously, when you become calm of that space, you want to go and fight for this meditation keyword. But if you're the top 20 in the meditation category, you're probably better off looking elsewhere. Like this is going to be a bloodbath if you go there straight.
Yeah, and I think it all makes sense. So just rolling back a little bit, you said that you were focused on subscription apps. Do you think subscription apps are the only ones that will get their ROI out of Apple search ads? Or is it just easier in that case because you have all of your numbers, you know how to measure, and it's simpler overall?
No, I don't think it's any easier. I mean, maybe it was easier a few years ago because there was less competition than typically in gaming. I don't think it's necessarily easier. It's not so easy to get like solid return on ad spend from subscription apps. No, it's not easier. But I know a lot of gaming company that have look at search ads with less interest um, than on subscription.
Interesting.
Maybe because of competition, maybe because sometimes people don't look for a specific type of game this way, like kind of discovery might be a little bit different, or I don't know, like maybe a bit more functional in the case of a lot of subscription apps because they're a photo editor or they're a language learning app or a VPN and those are things that people actively look for.
Yep.
I don't know. I'm not sure it's so much easier. No, but it's also a different battle. If you take, I don't know, the fintech vertical, for example, which is they have part of subscription, but it's mostly not subscription. There's like, I don't know, a crypto wallet, and then all the neo banks, for example, and the old banks and so on. I mean, the competition there is just it's crazy. It's really crazy. Yeah.
That's because the intent is kind of direct on one side, and then the competition is very very concentrated.
Yeah, it's also because very high LTV call for very high CPIs. I mean, if you're a subscription app and you're making $2 out of each install in average, or $10, and next to you've got like a crypto wallet that is making $100 profit. They can bid $50 an install; it's still profitable. If you're bidding $50 an install, you're losing 90% of what you're bidding. So it's a very different vertical in this sense. And I have this quote that says, "User acquisition is a business model competition." If you're on a model where you're making very little revenue out of every install, maybe search as another place to be. Like because the inventory is typically not very cheap, and maybe you'd rather focus on other action. I think on search ads, like it depends a bit the inventory, the vertical you're in, because obviously the level of competition is different. No, but it's pretty much it's more of a fit with high LTV products than it is with low LTV products.
What sort of high
even
LTV?
Within the subscription space, I know subscriptions that price very low because they want to lower the entry barrier, or because there's a network effect within the app, so they need the critical mass to be in there, and they don't manage to find a lot of profitability on search ads, but it's just because of their business model is slightly different, and that is not a really good fit for this channel.
Makes sense. So if you are at a point where you know that you have a fit, so Apple search ads are working for you, you are spending that amount of money, you ran a discovery campaign because it's a great idea, and you found a whole bunch of keywords that don't work, you would immediately make them into negative keywords. Or that's at least what I would do, right?
So no matter what happens, like no matter what the keyword is, I basically always put it in exact. And I put it in negative in the discovery campaign, and I put it in exact in another campaign, because I want to judge how it is.
Okay.
Maybe people don't click a lot on it, or maybe it's expensive, or maybe it's cheap. I want to see how the unique economic is on this keyword. So I'm going to focus on it, spend at least $100 or $200 on it, so that I get a minimum amount of install to
see what it's like,
the potential of it. And then I make my decision of, okay, I never want to bid on this keyword again, or I'm going to fight for it, like kind of. And there's a whole bunch of terms that I drop the ball after a while because I say, I'm not seeing the potential here. For example, if it converts very, very, very little post-install, I know very often what I do is I don't even abandon on it. It's just I put a bid that is so low that I usually don't get delivery. But then once in a while, competitors are going to drop, and I'm getting served at 10 cents a click. And at 10 cents a click, I'm making it back. And for a year, I haven't been served at all, and suddenly it serves again. So I usually don't fully pose them, unless there are a few terms that I fully pose, and there are a bit of like, I don't know, crack stuff. I have some VPN stuff that appear on something completely unrelated that never converts, so I want to leave that. But a lot of keywords, I just put them on a very low bid, and I go focus as well. So it's not like kind of I immediately put them in negative and discarding. The approach I tend to have is, with my keywords research and with insights, I dig into the potential intent of a keyword, and how do people click, how do they react. But on the discovery, I try to be completely agnostic of what the keyword means, until the point that I put a specific CPP to it to match the intent. But what I try to see is as if it was a number, and that's the reason why I can do search ads in any language, even those that I don't, is that I don't care what the keyword means. It's just, I'll take the metrics. If they're poor, I'm going to try to see what the intent and understand what's behind it. But mainly, it's a numbers game where I say, okay, that keyword is bringing this install at $2. I'm making $4 out of them. I'll take them. And it's not entirely true, because then when
Yeah.
something works, I try to dig deeper into, is there something adjacent that can work?
Yeah.
If something doesn't work, I'm going to try to dig deeper into, is there a USP I can surface that would work better or somewhat? So it's not entirely true. But in a manner, like in the first phase, before I know if it works or not, when it's in discovery and I'm moving in exact, I don't really care what the keyword means. Like, I'll try everything. I'll take them all. They're just numbers, or I don't know. I can't read Chinese or Russian. And for me, it's just like, I try to read the word as if it was in a foreign alphabet, and not like, this keyword has to work because it's so closely related to what I do. And that's usually not how it works.
Wow. Okay. So there's so much good stuff here, but I think this makes sense. So the idea is never throw anything away. Always use everything to your advantage. Not really because you want the keyword to work. It's not this visceral feeling. It's not a gut reaction. It's mostly because Apple's already doing it. So Apple thinks that you belong to this keyword in some way, shape, or form, and you have to find the right price at which you can actually make money off of this keyword. And it might be a price that's not realistic, meaning you might put a price that is just never going to show up. And that's okay, because it's kind of like making it into a negative keyword at the end of the day. So you're benefiting. It's a win-win situation. No, that's great. Now I need to figure out how to turn this into a product.
With like, I end up having campaigns with hundreds of keywords that don't deliver. And is it a bit useless? Maybe, but once in a while they do serve, and I'll take them. It's a bit of it's like we said before, the big battle is not there. But if I can get a 5% extra on discovery, a 10% extra on all these long tail of small keywords that are bid low, a little extra on keywords nobody bids on, a little extra on adjacent term, it all adds up. At the end of the day, you're going to scale on the short term, on the short tail, but don't just do. I mean, if you've got very little time, you're probably better off focusing on your top 10 keyword, like in terms of
throw all the money you need on it. Yeah, just take your money and throw it into the pit.
Yeah, but I like to go in breadth and depth. I also find it more fun. And sometimes, I'll often say this about such as that, of course, it's about the return and I want to be profitable there, but it's also about the learnings.
Yeah.
Sometimes because on the keyword, you can think about it for ASO stuff. Sometimes also to do actions that are completely different. Like this pizza thing. We ended up building ads with pizza for paid social out of the ID. Like sometimes there are things to port from it. So I'm also interested into how I can, okay, maybe this thing didn't work, but I'm going to try this ID in a very different manner on a very different platform, even if it's not purely ads, maybe for product things, or maybe an interview. I'm going to start digging with people like in user interview about the topic of understanding how they see it as an adjacent problem or something. So basically, it opens me in direction I wouldn't have gone otherwise.
Yeah, that makes sense. And it is discovery at the end of the day. So the more discovery, the better. And we do something very similar when it comes to App Store optimization, organic App Store optimization. You want to experiment with as many keywords as possible. You want to see what all of your competitors are doing. And you want to find those keywords from competitors that are not exactly your feature competitors, but are your ASO competitors because they're using similar features. And really, the algorithm decided to place them next to you or in your vicinity. So overall, that's kind of the same. There's a question in the chat that I want to talk about, and then I want to talk about branded campaigns and brand protection, because I think that's another area where money can easily be wasted. So Owen is asking, let me try and put this on the screen. Let's see if this worked. Aha, it worked. So Owen is asking, if you run an Apple Search Ads campaign on loads of low relevance keywords, won't that bring your TTR and CR rates down for search traffic, which could surely affect ASO organic keyword rankings? So do you want to take this?
I'll take a first dab, and you're even more an expert than me, so I'll let you wrap it up. I think this is a very relevant point. There's a potential side effect there, and there might be unwanted consequence on this. I'm not sure how much Apple takes, like, because I'm positioning badly on one keyword, they're gonna affect me on the keyword that I'm working on. I'm willing to take the risk, but I think it's a very, very valid point. It also depends a lot on how much you're relying on organic search traffic. And it's true that at the moment I said that, the couple of accounts where I'm doing that, they're very much focused on bringing paid traffic, and they have very little organic traffic anywhere. their particular vertical is not search driven, like on the main feature. So they go on a lot of adjacent terms that are not completely relevant. But in
Makes
their
sense.
case, they're not afraid of losing something they already don't have. And
Yeah.
I think this the I'm not saying the name, but I think the person who's making this point is actually maybe for you it's counterproductive. And I'm happy I'm being corrected, and I agree with this comment to some extent. But case by case basis, I guess, in this one.
Yeah, that's precisely it. But it becomes a little bit more complicated from what I've seen so far. There is no direct impact from Apple search ads on organic, and the conversion rate that Apple's really looking for is from organic search to organic views. And so you're not really getting that with ASA anyway, so you're not really hurting yourself. But there's another conversion rate, and that is from page view to install. And so the more you go broad, the less installs you have. And then that hurts a little bit. The only thing is, it really depends on the size of the campaign. I have looked at campaigns that had maybe 10, 15, 20, 30 keywords that were really hurting because some apps were going after really big keywords, really expensive keywords, but those keywords were not relevant for them. And I saw that in the photo and video. The photo editor space is full of those. And I'm not sure if it's because it's a search match campaign that just gone rogue, or maybe something didn't align properly. And you can see that it does make an impact overall, but only for that specific keyword from what I've seen. So it's not, one keyword is not really going to impact your entire everything organic. But when you do long tail, I haven't seen that really hurt. And you can see that with a lot of the big apps who are doing this well. They're just aiming for everything. Look at Temu, for example. Temu is shooting at everything. Legitimately, every single thing you can think of that you can buy inside of Temu. Brand names, types of things. They have shopping mall as one of their keywords. Their Apple search ads keywords, because people are looking for that, and Temu is kind of a shopping mall. So all that is not really hurting their organic. They're still showing up everywhere. And it is because they are high in their category. That's definitely helping, but it's not the only reason. So if you're going after the really big keywords and your conversion rate drops because it's totally irrelevant, one, you're wasting your money. And I think that the one company that I saw that was doing this, I wrote about it in my newsletter. I don't know if that was a mistake or maybe a misunderstanding or maybe an experiment. That could be an experiment. But that whole space, I think, is now really, really ready for, well, not really disruption, because CapCut came into the photo video editing space and really kicked everyone in the butt. And we're seeing this. You can see that they're now growing. Hang on, almost dying. I'm alive. So most of the photo and video editors are not growing their revenue. They're growing just marginally month over month, where CapCut is just slashing through. They grew 100+%, I think, within 3 months earlier in the year. I just published some data on it last week. So if you're trying to experiment with a really big keyword and there you're losing your relevance, then you're in trouble. Otherwise, I think you're going to be fine from everything I've seen.
It's also, I think here it's even if there are cases, I think we come also with the mindset of complex Google accounts or Facebook accounts where there is quite of a always hard to assess precisely, but kind of a quality score for the whole account.
Mm-hmm.
And where when you do weird stuff on the side, it might be damaging for the main stuff. But as a general approach, like Apple Search is quite more primitive as a channel.
Very.
And at the moment, and it might change, I do not think that there is anything like an account quality score where what you've been doing in discovery is going to hurt your short tail. But be careful that every platform is a bit specific. They might change it over time. I just don't think today is something that is particularly relevant. I don't know. Maybe I've missed out on the bad consequences, but I'm not
I haven't seen them either. So I think it's safe to go and do something like this. And I would actually advocate for it, because just what we were talking about before, you can go and fight the big battle and it's going to cost you a pretty penny. Or you can go and find all those other potentially relevant, maybe experimental keywords and try them. It takes a little bit more effort, but I think it's worth it in the long run, because you're really maximizing your spend. Every penny that you're putting in, you know that you're getting something out of. One way that you can make your pennies not make it into installs is a brand protection campaign, which I have a love-hate relationship with. How do you feel about those? And do you think everyone should have a campaign that has their name, their keywords up top?
So I also have a love-hate relationship with them for many reasons. The first one, as a user, I think it's a horrible experience to be You're looking for Tinder and you get Bumble. You're looking for Netflix and you're getting Prime. I think it's pretty terrible. In some case, good for some people, the opportunity, especially when apps change the name like Twitter and they completely fuck it up the day to the next. But because they exist, and that's also true on Google search and other, because they exist, it's kind of it's a pay-to-play game, but if you're not ready to pay, you lose. You lose anyway. So I prefer to play the game and get it my way. But the main reason I recommend to do defense is twofold. Well, threefold. One is that usually it's not super expensive compared to the rest because you've got very high relevancy, so you can defend your brand at a price that is a fraction of the price that it's going to cost the other to attack it, if we can say. But that's not the main point. The main point is, one, I want this data. We don't have a lot of very hard data from App Store Connect on search. And actually, for me, is a bit of my control cohort, like kind of when we have, I don't know, other metrics that go weird in the product because we run an experiment, because we've been changing the paywall, because we've got a new experience or whatnot. Typically, something that I'm going to do is I'm going to check how my brand cohort is behaving, because it's usually very stable compared to other things. Oh, Facebook traffic is less quality than the usual. Is the ASA brand as well? Because usually it's kind of a bit of a flat line in terms of how they convert. So it's kind of my reference, my kind of, so I use it as a testing ground to look at. I also use that data a lot to assess other operations. Like, I don't know, if we've been featured by a big influencer, or we're doing stuff that can't be tracked, or even on TikTok these days, people click less and less on the mentions, even in the ads, and that tend to have an effect where, especially the younger audiences, they would see you on the TikTok, they're not gonna click, they're gonna open the App Store, look for your name. And so having this brand campaign, especially if you have them all the time at 80-90% share of voice, enables you to assess like other so basically I pay for it for the value of the data, and for me that's the primary reason. There is a secondary reason, which is, even so, let's say I don't defend the brand, the amount of people who look for my brand and are going to go out is most likely going to be somewhere between 1% and 5%, because it's not like my competitor is going to get 20% click-through rate on my name. It depends on the name, but usually not. So what I see in my competitors is I'm not getting double-digit percent CTR, but let's say somewhere between 1% and 5% of those people who were looking for my app are going to download another app. The thing is that this is search. I'm not battling on the Instagram feed against everybody. That person not only had the intent of what my app is serving, but they even know I'm kind of reaping what I've done in other marketing actions, whether it's virality or whatnot. And it's kind of, I'm being stolen one of them, something that I've already paid for, because I already had the impact in terms of that person is looking for me. And the worst part of it is I'm losing it to my direct competitor. I'm not losing it of the install doesn't happen. Is that the install happened on my direct competitor, which eventually is a massive problem. So for me, there is a strategic price to pay to avoid that this small percentage of users are going to be lost, because they are a lot more value than any other install. Like, kind of the primary reason I do is for the value of data, but strategically I also prefer to not let them go to a direct competitor.
That is interesting. That's a very interesting take. And is there a size of a campaign where you would say, if you have, let's say, $100,000 a month, would you do it, versus if you had $10,000 a month, would you do it?
I typically always do it, like for the reason I've said before, but also because usually there's a bit of like not that the brand campaign are proportional for every app, because everybody has different actions and so on, but it kind of is like, let's say accounts are spending 10K a month, usually they're not going to have like 5K worth of inventory on their brand search. Or
Fair
maybe
enough.
it's because they're paying too much. Like, kind of, there is a bit of a proportionality between the two that happens. I don't really have a dedicated one. Like I have very different goals. Like on the brand campaign, my goal is to maximize the share of voice at the smallest price possible, because I'm paying for the data. So I want to cover the maximum of it, paying the least of it. So
Yep.
I'm trying to maximize really share of voice here. Once I'm on 90% share of voice, I mean, there's not going to be much more than that to get. I can iterate a bit on my CPP and stuff to convert them better, but basically that's what I'm aiming. On the other terms, I don't have at all this logic of I want the maximum of it at the lowest price.
Mm-hmm.
I want as much as I can as long as I'm profitable on this. On the
Yep.
brand campaign, I do look at the profitability, but usually it's not really a criteria. It's kind of, oh yeah, that campaign is returning at 10x. Yeah, obviously people were already looking for me. It's kind of one of my main rule or advice about brand campaign is to completely separate them. Like kind of search as these two channels. There's search as brand and search as everything else. And that's the way I recommend reporting it. Especially when you work with externals, agency and freelance, and they come back with the report, like, yeah, Apple Search Ads is yielding at 2 weeks return the last month. I'm like, really? Let's dig under the hood. And I'm seeing that the brand campaign is 10x and that everything else is at 0.3. And I'm like, okay, I think there's a problem here. So my advice to not fool yourself into thinking that Apple Search Ads is doing okay is merging the report. So I basically separate it as a different channel. They live into the same account. It's a pure reporting thing. It's not that you have to account or whatnot. It's just the way I look at it. Okay, this is Facebook, this is Google, this is Apple non-brand.
Yep.
And the Apple brand has a life of its own for the value of the data and for the value of the strategic, but I'm not super focused on the return on investment on that one.
That makes sense, and it really follows the same flow that we've talked about throughout this live stream. It's all about getting at the right price, not the lowest price, but the right price, whatever the right price for you, which means you have to measure a bunch of things. So you have to know what the right price is for you. So you have to know what your LTV is, or you have to decide at least what is the right number that below it, it'll be okay. Above it, they're like, losing money. That makes a ton of sense. There's a question from the chat where Raphael is asking, he's saying that he has a multiplayer award game with the keywords multiplayer award game in the app metadata, but when searching the App Store with those keywords, the game does not show up at all. So this is an ASO question, not really an ASA question, but that is very, very possible. Multiplayer, award, and game are super competitive. They're super generic, and you would have the same issue going into an Apple Search Ads campaign. And I hear this all the time, and I'm sure you hear this too. People will say, well, I have all these keywords in my name, and I try to get to, and I put them in my campaign, and I never show up. And they're like, well, and I keep increasing the price. The thing about it is there's no ceiling to some keywords. They're really, really expensive. And so that is, in my experience, that's been what has been most of the issue most of the time. Just budgets are not being correct. What would you do if you're trying to go for a keyword and you're just not showing up for it at all on the Apple Search Ads side of things?
Actually, happens more or less regularly that a keyword that I think I'm relevant at, maybe I have it in title or subtitle, I'm already bidding fairly high, and I'm just not getting any of it. Very often, I'm getting a few impressions here and there. It's not zero. It's kind of like a tiny number, but in some cases, it's zero. Typically, I try to shake the bids a little bit, and I mean, you can change as a CPP. If you don't have impression, it's not going to change much. But
yeah,
when I got too frustrated, at some point I kind of like try to trigger the option by allowing to lose money for a very short period of time. For a few hours, I would just bid insane just to get the impression. Because I noticed that sometimes it's not just that the competition is really high and you can't fight it. It's just that the auction is kind of not locked, but is in a state of, that's it, the share of voice doesn't move much on this keyword, and it's kind of, you have to shaken the option a bit. So if you can afford it, typically what I do is go with a stupidly high bid just for a few hours, like kind of unlock the inventory, try to shaken it. If I can afford to do it for 2 or 3 days, that's what I do, because then I get the cohort and I assess how much it's worth, and then I can come back and say, okay, so I can pay up to X, but I know this is going to be at a loss. It's kind of an investment in the future of, I want to shake the auction. This keyword, I want to know if it might be relevant. Obviously, when you do that, you don't want to let it drag too long, because I'm talking insane bids, like triple digits high sometimes.
Oh, wow. That is insane.
I used to put a lot of $99 to make those tests, but now what I do is I increase gradually, because I notice there is often a point that is much lower than my crazy bid. So I do it in, okay, doesn't work at 2, doesn't work at 5, doesn't work at 10. I'm going to try 20, I'm going to try 30, up to the point that there's one particular I bid in the 3 digits and it never showed up. But it's a very peculiar keyword where I suspect Apple is treating it differently.
It makes
because of
sense.
strategic reason. Let's say it's a keyword where Apple has their own product answering.
Somehow I'm not surprised. Everything that I've seen on the organic side, where Apple has a horse in the race, just misbehaves. Sometimes it misbehaves in a way that's very obvious, and sometimes it misbehaves in little weird ways. For example, up until I don't know exactly when, but a few months ago, if you search for keywords that could have an Apple app, Notes or Music or one of those, Apple's apps would only, unless it's the main keyword like Music or Notes, all the adjacent keywords, Apple would be third or fifth. I'm not sure why, but I've seen that across so many keywords that it has to be something. I don't think that's the case anymore. I think that's been fixed if it was broken.
I
But
think there was an investigation around that even, but that was a couple years ago or something.
yeah, but that's when they were number one for a bunch of keywords. They were just legitimately number one for no good reason. They didn't have the ratings, they didn't have the conversion rates, nothing was there. So they dropped it to third or fifth, which I guess made sense. It's a very simple algorithm to say we're not doing anything too shady, or apps are just in these results. But yeah, that was very. It makes sense. It makes sense. There is another question from the chat. AJ is asking, what are your thoughts on scheduling ads for specific times of the day? Do you do that?
I typically don't do that. I've seen people do it in specific industry, like in the food delivery, because like kind of you obviously have peaks. And more than scheduling, what they were doing is scheduling, like, okay, when it's the time for lunch, I'm gonna raise the bids to X, and when it's not, it's so I've seen a couple of accounts do that. I typically don't do it much myself. I've seen also people do this because typically in the US App Store, you've got a lot of users in other geographies that are on the US App Store, but are technically not in the US. And Apple takes it from the store. And so when they come on your side, you can see from geolocation that there's a lot of Middle East and lots of, I get a lot of traffic from Nigeria, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, a bunch of other geographies. And I had a couple of clients that say, no, but we don't want to pay for these users, like,
Yeah.
because we're super focused on the only US market, or maybe because of our licenses, they can't even operate there or whatever. And in this case, they were trying to do this. I think it's not a very efficient manner to proceeding. I have another trick that I might keep for someday about how to exclude this user not using the ad scheduling. The reason I don't do it is because, one, my particular apps don't really have an intraday seasonality. Like, it's not that the conversion is 3x higher in the afternoon than it is in the morning or whatnot. The other reason is joining what I said something before, which is I don't think, like, there is a bit of a lag on the platform. Like, you would see, for example, if you stop a campaign for 3 hours, it's going to continue to spend, like, as if it's not instant.
Yeah.
And so seeing how slow in reaction the platform is, I'm extremely careful about starting to dig into this hour is going to do this hour is going to do that. Mainly because I don't think the platform is even processing it properly. So it's kind of, you have the option in the interface, but you don't really know how in the background it's actually working. And because I've seen a lag of several hours on everything I'm doing, I'm like, I tend to avoid doing it. Maybe for the food delivery, it's a very particular case where it is relevant. I would say, in my opinion, it's only relevant if you notice that you've got extremely different conversion rate in your app, like kind of LTV, whatnot, at specific hours. And in this case, you might consider it. But otherwise, I'm generally not using that option very much.
Yeah, and that sounds like a micro optimization at this point, maybe a nano optimization if you have all that data and if you're measuring at that level of granularity. So that makes sense.
Yeah,
I've never really tried that.
I did use it at some point. I've got a funny example to give, but it's a very old example. I had this crazy competitor that was bidding super high, like insanely high, but they had a limited budget daily. And so every day they would take all the morning inventory at an insane price. And if I wanted to bid there, to overbid them, like, it was a complete, like, a bloodbath in terms of price. But I noticed they were hitting the budget and they were completely freeing up the auction at 2 p.m. or I can't remember exactly, like 12 p.m. or whatever. And then I scheduled things to have my bid at different level for one and the other, because when they were in the auction and when they were not in the auction, the other competitors and me, like, the whole mechanic of it would be very different. But it's because I had this bizarro competitor that was overpaying the inventory in the morning and not even fighting for it in the afternoon. It took me a while to discover the phenomenon, but Back then I had this, like, it's been a long time. I haven't seen this case, but that could be one. But see, it's a very, very specific edge case where that might be relevant.
This is a great trick. I love this. I love this because on the if you're tracking your ASO, your organic in an hourly fashion, you can see if that happens in general, if there's more demand for a specific competitor later in the day, earlier in the day. And it really doesn't happen with a lot of different keywords, but in the cases where you want to see it, you can see it. And then you can adjust it that way. That's pretty clever. That's why we're doing this, to learn, to share wisdom. There's a question from David from Revenue Cat, who's asking, how do you measure the return on ad spend by keyword?
So, so the first thing is when you start on Apple Search Ads, it only goes up to the install of Apple. So that's not what you want. So you want to either integrate there's an open API to attribute on your side, and you don't depend on ATT. You can attribute yourself. You can use the out-of-the-box version from the MMP, and Revenue Cat also has it out of the box if you're using Revenue Cat. So you have the keyword level data. What you want to see there is how is this cohort developing. So let's say I've paid for 100 install trigger by that particular keyword, and I'm going to basically monitor how the conversion and revenue are coming from that specific cohort against another specific cohort. Because typically keywords have very different intent between one and another.
Yeah.
So they will have a different conversion rate, but it's even more than conversion rate. I don't want to even average that. I want to observe how do they cancel, how do they renew, how it looks at month 3. So obviously when I'm starting, I just assume it's going to be on the average because I don't have the data. But then when I do it for several months, I want to look back and say, okay, how is this keyword actually developing compared to the other? So this, you can do it yourself. You can do it through tools like Revenue Cat. You can do it through tools like an MMP. What I do recommend is that you don't average everything. You have to do it at the beginning when you don't have enough data. But as you operate for a very long time, you really want to see the exact return on investment at that kind of level. Yeah. There is also a balance in, at some point you need to predict, like you need to, and client to client have a very different approach to this. So some client would have a very complex predictive model of saying, okay, the user has done this and that, so we predict that they're going to generate $50 over the course of their lifetime. Some other apps, they just block at day X. They say, what is the revenue after 7 days? What is the revenue after 6 months, after 1 month? And they kind of mark a fixed value, because when you have the revenue developing, the problem is that you start comparing a cohort that is 3 months old with a cohort that is 1 month old. And obviously they haven't had the same time to generate revenue because maybe there's the renewals or whatnot. So using like kind of a fixed term of, and I don't think there's a better reason to choose 7 days or 1 month or 6 months or whatnot. Like I see different apps doing different like time, but it's good to compare apples to apples in this case, of having like kind of a method that enables you to understand if the value is coming back from this keyword or from this keyword at that level without averaging everything. Averages have, obviously you need a lot of data. Like if you're getting 20 installs a day across 10 keywords, it's going to take a very long time to assess this, and you will have to average, and that's okay. That's normal. It's basically the more data you get, the more you should de-average thing to really understand in depth, like keyword by keyword. You don't have to do this at the very beginning. You don't have the data yet. It takes a lot of resources to go at that. The resources in terms of tooling you need, but even mentally, to look at all this. Once you start spending significantly and for a period of time, I think this is like a must. I don't know if I answered the question, but I guess I did.
Yep. That was, I think that's exactly what I was looking for. It all makes sense, because at the end of the day, that's what you're trying to optimize for. And so you just have to do it. Okay, that works. There is one, I think, last question. I don't know if we have any more time.
I have a bit more time. I know you wanted to talk about the new placement. I'm curious you didn't stick it, but let's take the question from the audience first.
Let's do the question, then we'll talk about new placement, and then we'll continue. We'll go a little bit over because we started late, and I didn't even get a chance to ask everyone what's in their cup. I don't have any more tea in my cup, but I had some tea in my cup. I know, we're just rushing. But the question is, what do you think about buying keywords where the app is well ranked organically? Would you do it?
Yeah, it's always a bit of a debate. I know some people have this thing that as soon as they rank #1 organically, they stop bidding on search ads, and there are tools that enable to automate that. me personally, I want to get as much of it anyway. So
Okay.
if the keyword is extremely relevant and I manage to rank first and I manage to get the share of voice, what I want is to push my competitor as far away as possible. So I'm going to have the ad and then the first result and then maybe my promoted IAP and then maybe my in-app event and then there's a featuring and then my direct competitor is like 5 screens below. So me, is there a cannibalization when you do that and you're paying for a part of it that would have come organically? Absolutely. But what I also believe is if you don't do it, there's a part of a loss. Like there is also an incremental part. So if you're really advanced, you want to look at your return only on the incremental part and not on all of it, which is technically a lot more complex to do, but it's doable. Requires a lot more digging and crunching. It is possible, and it doesn't always look good. Like maybe this incremental part is not worth it. But I still usually do it 1 out of simplicity, 2 out of maximization. I want as much of it as possible, and 3 out of like, for me, it's kind of usually people who ask that, they're very focused on, yeah, but you're paying for something you would get. And my answer is, yeah, are you sure you're getting all of it if you're not? Because as you stop bidding, you're ranking first organically, but how much traffic is going to go to that first result, which is like on your brand term, is probably a very strategic term. If you're ranking organically number 1, is usually a fairly relevant term to what you're doing. You're not ranking first on something that is completely irrelevant. And so this super strategic inventory about somebody looking for exactly what I do, learn Croatian, like, yeah, I want that user. And there's no way I want him to go to my direct competitor. Like for me, those terms are exactly where there is an extra value that is strategic, which is the opposite when it's a term that is fairly relevant, the discovery terms and the end of the like really adjacent field is where I would say in this case, it would be very questionable how much more incremental it is. But in a very strategic keyword is more like my brand is kind of this traffic as for me as an extra value to it.
That makes sense. But, and how much would you spend on it? At what point do you say this is too insane, this bid? Do you keep it low like you would with a branded keyword, or is it a matter again of just, is it making me money?
So because I work for others, they usually set the profitability goal themselves. So my role is to maximize the volume at that level of profitability. So that's what I would go to.
So you wouldn't take it at a loss.
If it was my app and my money, I would probably set profitability goals that are different based on keywords. That are based on how I see the development of the thing. I don't want it to be average, which often happens, but I would, honestly, in many cases, I want as much of it as, if it's sufficiently profitable for what my goals are, I want as much as possible. I want to maximize the share of voice. And also when you maximize a keyword, like it brings extra benefit that when you've got 90% share of voice, you've got this data that you know is stable. You can analyze a lot of things. The keyword is going up, is going down, because you're basically owning it. Like you're owning 90% of it, which brings extra insight compared to when it's fluctuating or you just have 20 or 30% of it. So I actually love this situation where I'm maximizing the position. I only want to do it if it's profitable enough. Obviously, I'm not going to some clients have this, they're like, I want to maximize the share of voice on that keyword, no matter how much it costs. I'm like, okay, it's gonna cost you a lot. Like, but and I'm like, look, according to the few days of data, it's gonna cost you this to protect it for the whole month. Are you sure you want to do this? Like, and that's their decision. It's the most strategic decision. In this case, I wouldn't do it. It's just like a battle of. But maybe it's for more awareness or long-term goal or whatnot. I usually don't like to spend money where it's not coming back, but everybody has their own goal, appetite for growth as well. You could see it in some verticals that are just bidding insanely because there's a race towards who's going to be the last man standing, or that especially happens in delivery and mobility sectors, for example. The goal for them is not to return X or Y. The goal for them is to be the number one of the vertical, because every other one is going to die and they're going to merge and acquire until there's only one player. So it's a completely different approach. Like here, my clients are a lot more focused on, is the money coming back? There's also a big question of when it's coming back. Like if defending the term is possible, but the payback period is like a year or something of renewals, there's a point where we need financing for it. Like, is it really worth it? Do we go look for financing? not just VC, but also company that forward the money or whatnot. And then there is the cost of capital that comes into the equation that makes it more complicated as well. But for most cases, it's basically, if it's at my profitability goal, I want as much of it as possible.
Yep. I think that makes sense. And I think in general, maybe without those exceptions, the food delivery and those other apps that are really trying to just gain market share, as long as you're making money, that's probably the cutoff. If you're making money, great. If you're losing money, maybe you don't need to do it. But that's also, again, if you have all those additional activities that we talked about before, maybe you're doing, say, in other places that are making you more money, maybe you have a long tail campaign that is earning you money, maybe you can take a small loss just to be that number one, 2, 3, 4, 5 in that one particular keyword, and that can work. So that's how you would scale that. So, okay, let's talk about the other types of campaigns, because that's something I've been, again, love-hate relationship with. Apple allows you to, in addition to keywords, to advertise in the search results page before anyone has searched for anything, which I think is just ludicrous. And they also give you the ability to advertise on the Today page, which feels oddly weird, but also within an apps you may also be interested in. What do you think about all those, and what's your relationship with those?
It was clear Apple would add more placement, and eventually they did, because search by nature is limited, so the platform would stop growing in terms of revenue. I mean, search is just one part of the activity, and search ads was always going to be limited by the amount of people who search for things, even if it's 500 million every week. Compared to more of a display or a feed where the type of inventory is completely different. The same applies for Google on search versus YouTube. Even if search is that big, there's an amount of opportunity that depends on the search volume. So I'm not surprised Apple added it. I'm very surprised they decided to put it in the Today tab, which I thought was sacred and was going to stay clean of ads
forever and ever, right?
It didn't. But I also thought that of the App Store in general, and then they added the search ad, and then it came to the Today tab. But the Today tab is the one I expected the least. It was one I was quite exciting. First, because it's what appears when you launch it, so like kind of the volume potential for impression is just massive, and also because I suspect a lot of people are associating it to like more. Oh, this is a natural result. It's not an ad. I personally think the execution of this placement has been pretty poor, which makes that for most advertisers, this placement is not really something that matters a lot. For awareness, it's definitely something that I like when I don't know, an app has a big rebranding and they're making a big awareness campaign around their new logo and their new name, and they put ads in out of home, in the metro and in the whatnot. I see it as a fantastic complement. Like the eyeballs there, especially since nobody clicks and you pay on clicks, the CPMs are actually pretty low. Like kind of a lot of people see you, but not a lot of people click on it. So kind of as a branding placement has some interest. There are two things that make it completely horrible. The first one is the creative itself, which Apple just changed 2 months ago, which went from horrible to nothing.
To really bad.
Just now it's just your icon and the title. So actually, I think this was a very bad decision from Apple in the sense of this placement made sense for people who had something specific to communicate. So we would create a CPP that say, oh, look at my new logo, look at my new feature, look at my new thing, not the generic approach. And then suddenly I can't do that anymore. So the only reason to advertise on the placement has gone away, which is kind of a bit bizarre. But even before, when we had the liberty to put a CPP, it looks so different from the look and feel of the Today tab. It felt so off. And even people who were trying to create something very nice, it looked awful because you had this screenshot like moving. That was really terrible, like really bad. I think the execution has made this. Then there's another problem that comes to it is that because it's not targeted at all, there's no keyword, there's no specific intent, it's just people opening the store. You got all kind of people, but maybe these people are not interested in your multiplayer games, into your crypto wallet, into your fitness app. Like it's kind of so random. Like you get in front of everybody. There's not any kind of behavioral targeting there. So the few people who click, a lot of them, they just explore, they're just browsers, or maybe it's just a fat click. And then the conversion rate you see from this placement, they're horrendous. Like they're really horrendous.
I imagine it's the tiniest ever across all campaigns.
Well, the featuring traffic is typically not great either, but that's another topic.
Yeah.
One thing I do not understand is there's this thing called the match rate, which is when Apple tells you 100 install happen in the campaign, whether it's search or this today tab or another, then on your side, whether it's through an MMP, the Open API or whatnot, you would see another number, which is usually lower. So it depends a lot your size, but there is always a bit of a gap between what Apple reports and what you see on your site. A gap that is not small. And we're not talking about 1-2% here. I have cases that go to 30-40% gaps. And there is something, I'm not too sure why it happens. I have a bit of a theory, but I never managed to prove it, which is on this new placement, the match rate between the Apple installs and the MMP installs is much bigger on the new placement. So if I take an example, I have an app like for every 100 install, we report 70 on our side. So, okay, we take the 70. On this new placement, we're like at 25, 30. So that makes the unit economic even worse because at the end of the day, the client is going to tell me like, and I think here comes the big conclusion on this placement is that they're not meant for pure performance. If you're only measuring like the direct returns from what is tracked or from what's measured from these installs, it's very likely that you are going to end up spending close to nothing or nothing at all. Because just they're really, really hard to make it from a direct return perspective. They've been created from the first place as more of a branding placement.
Yeah.
And maybe not the product page, like the one that is at the very bottom. That is a bit different in this case because you can be on similar apps and so on. But in this case, there is an intent. Somebody is in your category, is looking at a competitor or whatnot. But for the search, but it's a very small inventory compared to the other two. The search tab and the today tab, where there's a lot of inventory, there's obviously less intent. Those, they're not meant to be as a pure direct return. It's kind of funny how Apple sold it over time. So first it was like, oh, access displacement that nobody else ever had before. It's new. And then they started saying, oh, if you buy a lot of it, you'll notice how people are going to search more for your app, which is kind of indirect effect of brand awareness in a way. I was like, yeah, I mean, in some case that happens. The thing is, I failed a lot at them because the amount I had to spend for this small effect to happen was just not, I was not making it back either. And then the latest one is, yeah, but look, if you do it big enough and long enough, actually your conversion rate in your app improves, which is also true of any kind of very long-term brand building action that you're doing over the years. The thing is, do you have the budget to take the risk to spend dozens of thousands every month until this effect materializes in 6 months?
Maybe in 6 months. Maybe.
A very big company. Maybe in 6 months. Like for some people, it makes sense. And at the beginning, you could see like all kind of advertisers trying this placement. And as the time goes, you see who's advertising heavily there. In the search tab, for example, you see Google a lot, you see Amazon a lot, you see Temu a lot. There's a reason behind it. The logic of advertising is completely different to most advertisers who are looking for a return. I mean, the mechanics of brand and awareness, when you reach that kind of size of billion-dollar company or trillion in the case of Amazon and Google, are completely different. I understand that for them, maybe it makes sense. For 100% of my client, displacement has been a disaster. In some case, we managed to find a tiny bit of profitability, but at a scale that is just ridiculous. It's just, we bid so low that we just like what we started from there and I ended up there. It's kind of, to make it back, I have to bid very low. Because I bid very low, I'm getting served very little of it. One particular account I was checking last month, I think they spent 2K across the whole month. But it's an account that spent 6 digits in a month. So for them, like this 2K, they kind of a peanuts. They asked me to not even report it more than once quarterly because they don't want to hear about it. But they also tell me if it works at that scale, we'll still take it. You know?
Yeah, why not?
Plus, they were happy because it's like a lot of impression. You know, I'm like, oh yeah, we spent 2,000, but we got, I can't remember the exact figure, but it was millions and millions of impressions. So it's always something in the company. Oh yeah, we've got millions of impressions here. It's nice. Maybe somebody's going to figure out. I don't think the effect of this million impression is going to be much, but that's just my personal. I'm very focused on direct return, and probably there's a lot of brand consideration I'm missing. And I would completely understand that Apple would argue differently to my point, but that's my opinion, so I'm serving it.
I think brand plays make sense, depends on who you are, but this live stream is all about optimizing, so a brand play is definitely not an optimized solution for where to put your money, and we're just thinking about direct returns. I would not touch that with a stick. And I would say the same thing about the search campaign. If you are, there's just, Apple says that they somehow managed to know what you're going to search for before you search. So they're going to place an app that makes sense right at the top. One, it never works. It's always Temu. But
I would have believed in the case of Google, because they are really good at predictive, and
Google,
they've shown
yes.
in different products that they actually achieve this. That it's very possible that at some point Google, before you even type, start showing you that is relevant to what you're going to search, because they're so good at it.
Mm-hmm. They have so much data.
I've never seen an Apple product that actually achieved that, and I don't mean in search. I mean in like it's company. They're unbelievable at other things.
Yeah, search is just not one of those.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And predictive search. Personally, my experience of the search tab as a user, but also in the data I see as an advertiser, is that this is not how it's happening. There is no predictive thing about,
Nothing
this user might be interested in this app. Like, and I see it for my own usage. Like, I'm seeing apps that are so irrelevant to my behavior and what I'm interested in. I'm like, this is not possible that there is a sophisticated algorithm behind this. Nope. And I'm seeing so much irrelevant stuff.
Yep, not at all. I think it's a brand play at best, and I think it's not something that's worth optimizing for. But what do you think about the you might also like side of things? Have you had any experience with that? And do you think that's worth it?
So those the product page ones, right?
Yep, the product page one.
Well, those are very different. Like the search tab and today tab is a zero intent thing that's very much a brand play. The product page thing, they're actually quite interesting for a number of reasons. The first one is that I wish we could target specific apps. We can't.
Yeah.
We can only target similar categories. So
maybe
I wish
not
it
yet.
was also
maybe in the future
categories. That would be brilliant, because I could see how different categories react. And categories are very broad. I mean, within a category, I always look at clusters within it. You know, in the education space, you've got the kids app, the language learning, you've got all the Blinkist, you've got the piano apps, you've got like, it's, you know, it's a lot of, you've got book stuff. It's very broad. So similar categories, a bit weird, but that's what I want to be on. And it's interesting because if somebody is going to be browsing my competitor, I have a chance to appear there. It might be relevant. There's possibly more intent, not necessarily, but possibly. The other one is that I tend, maybe I'm wrong, but I tend to see that in the App Store, I see two different behavior, which is I open the App Store, I know what I'm after, I'm going to go for it, and I'm going to install it. I open the App Store, I look for Instagram, I'm going to click get, and that's it. I have Instagram, and bye-bye. And you've got the explorers. The explorers, maybe they're going to search a few terms, maybe they're going to look at the featuring, and maybe when they're on your page, they're not going to check the first screenshot and make their decision, but they're going to actually explore, your privacy label and blah, blah, and they're going to scroll. And this ad is at the very, very bottom of it, which is at the same time the beauty of it, and it's and the reason why it's doomed. The reason why it's doomed is nobody gets to the bottom of it.
That's what I was going to say. I think it's, in theory, such a good idea because you're within apps that are similar. There is intent. You don't have to worry about keywords because you're getting all the keywords that those apps are targeting. But who sees it? No one scrolls to the bottom. I think that's the main problem.
I was actually surprised to see the number of impressions on that placement, because my anticipation it was going to be even less. So I was slightly surprised. So maybe there's a more lot explorers than I thought. So basically what I'm saying is that I quite like this placement. It's a bit hidden. The problem is it's another one of this extra 1%. It's never going to be the case.
Fair enough.
No matter what you do. And I have I have one particular account where those campaigns are yielding decent return, but it's just the scale of it is, I mean, I like doing it, so I'm happy doing it. But honestly, does it even justify the effort that I put on it?
It really is that small? Sure. Like, it's really that?
It depends. I'm trying to open one particular account to see, and they had 3 million impressions last month on this placement. So that's not nothing.
Okay.
But this is a very large account. So
how big is what do they normally get in terms of impressions? Is it in the hundreds of millions? If you can share.
In the low 8 digits.
Okay, so it is still a small fraction, even though the absolute number is big. It's still a small fraction.
The thing is that we look at impression, but so maybe the impression is like a small double-digit percentage. If you look at the install of the revenue, we're talking 1%. Because this placement also makes a number of impression. Yeah. The conversion rate on this is not the same level.
Interesting. Okay, so that's exactly what that's exactly what I didn't expect. I expected the impressions to be down because no one scrolls all the way down, but it seems like even those explorers that do eventually see it, they're not really exploring for profit. They're exploring more
No,
because they want to click
but
around,
by
tap around.
definition, they're explorers. So when they see you, they don't click on
Yeah.
it. They keep exploring. That's what they
Yeah.
do, you know?
They're not really looking
Plus,
for
the
something.
page
There's
is
no
really
intent.
long, you know?
Hmm.
The page is really long. You've got the in-app event, you've got the video, you've got the reviews, you've got the privacy levels are
Yep,
this thick.
exactly.
And then you've got these apps you might like, and you're one of them. There's several of them. So
Hmm.
in the whole scheme, I mean, how much real estate do you occupy on the whole page? I don't know, a couple % at best. So
Tiny,
the
tiny,
likelihood
tiny.
of somebody who scrolls through this 10-page long thing to click on you when they see you. I mean, I don't know I don't remember the exact click-through rate that I got on that, but they're familic. I mean, not that bad. 4%.
Okay. Not very far, but
Oh no,
also
that's not 4%. Sorry, I had a filter on. I'm
ah,
gonna check again. Yeah, it's around 4%. Not too bad.
it's again,
I'm surprised.
it's how you scale. You just add more and more and more. But I think the crucial element here is that you have to know your price. So you have to know your costs, where you're becoming either profitable or not profitable, and then know if you want to cap it or if you actually want to go for it. But it sounds like you should always go for it just at the right price. So nothing is sacred. Everything is an advertising opportunity, a display opportunity at this point.
It's also the time you want to invest on the channel, because it also brings learnings.
Of course,
I would
that's always the
think
case.
that smaller organization, you need, I mean, priorities means you need to say no to some stuff.
Hmm.
And this is really deep, and maybe it's going to bring 1% of a 10% channel, and maybe it's not an effort ever worth pursuing,
Yeah,
because the scaling potential is so little, and in your whole team, you're 1 or 2 people. Maybe it's something you just put on the side. Me, I do it because I like to explore this kind of new products and so on, but also because I consider it's my responsibility towards my clients to go to the end
absolutely.
of the possibilities, and that's part of it. Then if they start paying me less, maybe I'm just going to focus on the top 10 keyword, but
Yeah.
I also like this maneuver. And that's a non-choice. Like, is it really worth the effort? Is somebody, the question is worth asking, but only each one can answer, yeah, I'm willing to explore this small possibility because it adds up, or
Yeah.
no, I've got bigger fish to fry. My time is more, even if I manage to make it profitable at 2K a month spend, am I actually
It's
recouping the
not
time
scale.
I put in there? Like,
Yeah.
that's a question. Not just the return on ad spend, but the
Hmm.
return on ad spend plus the maintenance is a very different question. Me,
Return
I
on
take fun
effort.
in doing it, and that's the reason I also charge my clients so that I can explore. But
Yeah. But that's
maybe
also why they
maybe
hire you, because you have explored. So you know things that people don't. Well, I mean, you know things that you shared with us, so our listeners know a whole bunch more. But that exploration, especially because we know that Apple is going to pour more into this, more effort, more money, more time. They're going to make more things available. If you now get into this, the more you know, I think the more you'll be able to scale in the future as well, and do it the right way.
yeah, nothing to add.
Great. Well, I think we've reached the end. This has been probably the longest live stream we've done, but there was just so much good stuff. I want to chunk up all these different little bites and make them into little videos, because there are so many things that I have even learned. I want to turn half of the stuff we talked about into products, just so you know. We'll talk about that later. But this has been really more than I even thought we'll talk about, even though we wanted to talk about a whole bunch of other things, but that might be a second part to this that we'll do in the future. Thank you very much, Thomas, for joining us. Thank you for everyone who asked questions. I did not get to nearly half of the questions, so I'm going to go through the chat later and answer all the questions in the comments. So if you asked a question in the chat and you didn't get an answer from us, I'll be in the comments. If you want to join me, Thomas, you can join me as well. We'll leave some comments on the video later today. And if you still have any questions, you can always email me or find me on Twitter. Thomas is on Twitter, ThomasBCN. That's where I follow you and I see a lot of what you're saying. Are you also on other places, or is Twitter your X, your place?
I'm on a lot of Slacks and forums like Mobile Dev Memo or Sub Club, which is also pretty good. Not too much on LinkedIn, but a little bit. It's
Yeah,
a love and hate relationship platform.
that's all of us, I think, at this point. Moving from Twitter to LinkedIn is tough, even though Twitter or LinkedIn is trying to become Twitter with their feed and everything else. I did my newsletter also on LinkedIn, or I do my newsletter on LinkedIn, and I'm getting the hang of it slowly. So if you have questions for Thomas, go on Twitter and say hi, or if you're in one of those communities, a shout out to the Sub Club, which opened up yesterday a little bit. If you're looking for a nice forum, I'll drop a link into it in the comments as well, run by David Barnard, who's on this live chat. So, yep, highly recommended. Go and check it out. It was a private forum, and now it's opening up, I think, as of yesterday or the day before. Really worth looking at it. Cool. Anything else you want to add at the end?
No, that was really fun. I'm happy we went in a bit more depth to less topics, even if we couldn't explore everything. But that's better than scratching the surface at all of it. It was
Exactly.
a fun conversation. I'm sure a lot of people will be left with a bunch of questions, but it's good that you do follow up a bit in the comments, and we'll do this again. I have more content around search ads if you look around it, and there will be more coming. So hopefully it completes the picture bit by bit.
Bit by bit. I think that's the key here. Alrighty, well, thank you again, Thomas, for joining me. This was a pleasure. We'll share some links in the comments later on, so come back to this video. And like Frank said in the chat, if you haven't already, give the video a like so YouTube knows that we're awesome, and subscribe to the channel. We will do more of this, obviously, and we have done a lot of this. That's it for me.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye, everyone. We'll see you later for another live stream.